It's me. Right, Will?
That's right.
Welcome back, everybody. Let me introduce you to our panel. Will Kane's with us this morning. He's a CNN contributor and a columnist for theblaze.com.
Me and the ladies this morning.
That's right, you and the ladies. Congresswoman Mary Bono Mack is with us. She's a Republican congresswoman from the state of California. And Erin Carmone is a staff writer at salon.com, joining us as well for the first time. Great to have you this morning. That was off my playlist. Mary J. Blige. We usually start at my house when I used to not come here in the morning, and I was like getting people ready for school with No More Drama, which is really good. It's like, everybody take a deep breath. Let's get it together.
You started with your own playlist at home with your children?
Yes, I did. They're small and impressionable. Right. That's why I did it. Our starting point this morning is the closing day of the NATO summit. It's happening in Chicago, and many people expect that it's going to bring more protests, and probably violent protests like we saw yesterday, where dozens of people were arrested. Clashes with police happened on Sunday near the summit meeting site. Anti-NATO demonstrators say they're going to march to Boeing headquarters today. Let's get right to CNN's Ted Rowlands. He was in the middle of the chaos on Sunday. I'm sure he'll be back at it right in the middle again today. What are they saying about what they're going to try to do at Boeing, Ted?
Well, so the plan is to shut down Boeing, and what they're doing is they're going to surround the building. It's a very large building downtown Chicago here. They're launching that in the next hour here in Chicago, and they say they're going to be there all day long. Now, Boeing is pretty much shut down anyway because of this threat. They put up fences around the building, and they've told their employees to work from home. But they'll be out there again today. They were at it last night until after midnight. 40-plus arrests and several injuries yesterday. Several injuries to protesters and also to police officers. 4 police officers were injured, according to the Chicago Police Department. 1 officer stabbed in the leg. In fact, last night, the superintendent of the Chicago Police came out and said, if there's any finger pointing after looking at this video, those fingers should be pointed squarely at the protesters. My officers, he said, were protecting themselves.
In some of these pictures, Ted, we see the police, obviously, sometimes with their batons out, you know, kind of smacking at the protesters. And I think you see a couple of different groups of protesters. You see folks who are dressed in black with the black bandanas, the black bloc. And then you see other protesters who seem to be more peaceful, sort of carrying signs and sometimes just marching silently through. Tell me about those 2 different teams of protesters.
Yeah, and the vast majority of the protesters who are in Chicago this week are the ones that are here for a specific issue. We had a number of nurses, thousands of nurses here on Friday. We had some Iraqi and Afghanistan war vets here yesterday carrying signs, trying to deliver a message to the NATO leaders, and they have been following the rules. They've had permits for all of their protesters. And then there's the small group, the very small group of agitators who have been defiant, who have ignored police commands to move off of certain areas, and that's where the trouble really is.
Ted Rowlands for us this morning. Thank you, Ted. Appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit more about actually why everybody is in Chicago for the summit. Damon Wilson is a former top aide to the NATO Secretary General. He's also the executive vice president at the Atlantic Council. They're hosting a conference for young leaders at the summit today. It's nice to see you. Thanks for talking with us. Obviously, the focus of the conversation.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Afghanistan is the focus of the conversation. And that's tough on a number of fronts. First, you have troops. Then you have sort of the financial commitment. Then you have sort of long-term relationship commitment conversations to be had. What's the main focus, or is it sort of all of the above that has to be discussed today?
You know, it is all of the above. This is a focus on Afghanistan, and frankly, the summit's been a forcing event for President Obama, the NATO Secretary General, to help sort of bring back the coalition and focus it on a way forward in Afghanistan when there have been a lot of questions about a tough war. And so what you're seeing coming out of Chicago is an effort to keep the allies, keep the members of the coalition all on the same message, the same page with the strategy that keeps the NATO mission through the end of 2014. But recognizes, builds in milestones in 2013 to transfer lead responsibility to the Afghans in Afghanistan. So this has been part of a real effort to try to unify all the partners in Afghanistan at a time when there were a lot of questions being raised about the way forward.
A lot of questions being raised, and also we're in the midst of a big financial crisis. Certainly the European nations may not want to commit to anything financially till 2024. How big of a problem is that going to be?
Well, certainly, I think this whole summit is characterized by how does NATO operate in an age of austerity when defense budgets are tight. You just have to accept that reality. But you think about where we've come from. We've had our partners in Afghanistan in this mission, fighting in this war for over a decade. That's a pretty remarkable accomplishment. And so what the summit's doing is trying to lock everyone in for the next 2 years on clarity, try to fulfill the mission in Afghanistan in a way that doesn't let al-Qaeda and the Taliban return to create problems in Afghanistan again. So the financial aspect's huge. It's a serious issue. But what you're seeing is the Allies signing up to a plan that does commit to end the war, leads them through a path of gradual drawdowns, and increasingly transfers the responsibility to Afghans. And the Allies will remain, rather than in a combat role, more in a training and advising and assist role, a much cheaper role as well.
Hey, Damon, this is Will Kane. You know, the Europeans may not even be President Obama's biggest problem at these NATO meetings. I know that President Asif Ali Zardari from Pakistan was invited to discuss, among other things, how the supply routes from Pakistan into Afghanistan have been shut down. What's the relationship going to be like between President Obama and the President of Pakistan over these next couple days?
You're right. That's a key issue here. In fact, President Zardari received a very late invitation. NATO had basically taken the point of view that as long as Pakistan was blocking the supplies to NATO forces in Afghanistan, well, it was actually not helping the operation. It was really working to undermine the NATO mission. And so the alliance held out to issue the invitation until there was a real prospect for a breakthrough on these negotiations. So it's been a difficult relationship. It's been and it will continue to be a complicated relationship.
Is the tenor of this meeting?
I think the alliance.
Is the tenor of the meeting between President Obama and President Zardari to make this more tense almost? I read they won't meet individually. They won't meet in person in order to put pressure on the President of Pakistan.
Well, Secretary Clinton has had a long session with President Zardari, but that is the focus. If you're going to come to a NATO summit and be part of the community that's trying to help the mission in Afghanistan succeed, then Pakistan needs to come to the table with good intentions to help conclude a deal to allow the resupply of forces in Afghanistan. It's a critical issue for the success of this mission. As long as Pakistan prevents that, it really does have a real drawback, a really effort to undermine the mission. So I think they're close to an agreement, and I think that's why you see Zardari here. So there won't be a bilat with the president, but he's sitting here around the table with all the other nations that are trying to help Afghanistan succeed, and that's a good thing.
Hi, it's Irene Carmon from Salon. Question for you. While we're talking about the president's relationship with various leaders, I understand that in contrast to the relationship with Zardari, there has been an improvement of relations with Hamid Karzai. Do you see what's responsible for the change in that dynamic, and do you see that holding up?
You know, I think folks, what I've heard from many of the delegates, many of the allies, is that folks have been very pleased with the attitude that President Karzai has come to this summit with. It's one of the big concerns. NATO knows that the real success in Afghanistan has to come from responsibility from Karzai, from the Afghans, in terms of good governance, anti-corruption. And the president's been on message. President Karzai has been saying the right things in here, Chicago. I think the test is whether he can continue to deliver good governance, serious anti-corruption efforts, and help lead Afghanistan through a real democratic transition as his term comes to an end. But you saw Karzai out yesterday thanking the American people, for the American taxpayers for their commitment to Afghanistan, and that sets the right tone, I think, here in Chicago from Afghanistan's part.
Congresswoman.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to ask the question that the president really needs to take the opportunity right now, especially with these protests, to reinforce our commitment to NATO and really talk about the importance of really retaining the leadership role. Do you think he's coming across at all to the American people? Because I don't. I think he really needs to make the case that it is important that we maintain a strong alliance, that it's much cheaper actually to be strong than it's going to be if we lose our strength in the world. And I think the president has projected a lot of weakness there. Is he again pushing it all to the American people, an agenda of a strong NATO leadership role for America?
I think he is. When you heard the president yesterday, he was talking about this alliance as a force multiplier for the United States and its efforts around the world. So first of all, the fact that the United States is hosting this summit, this is only the third NATO summit ever to be hosted on U.S. soil. That by itself is a real testament and demonstration of U.S. commitment to the alliance. But you're right. For the American people, who have been watching the war play out in Afghanistan for a decade, who have been questioning whether Europeans are ponying up their fair share of the burden in the alliance. The public diplomacy side of this is important to show that the United States is committed to the alliance, but more than that, the United States is really the leader of the alliance, and that's playing out here in Chicago. And I think you'll continue to see more of that today. President Obama's statements about how the alliance actually helps the United States succeed in the world is the right message for the American people, particularly at a time when defense dollars are tight. Having 40,000 European troops with us in Afghanistan is 40,000 fewer American troops, and that's a good thing for the American taxpayer.
David Wilson joining us this morning. Thanks for your time. Good luck with your panel today. I know you're going to be talking to a lot of young leaders. It'll be interesting to hear what they think is sort of the way forward as well. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Let's get right to Christine. She's got an update on the other stories making news today. Hey, Christine.
Thank you, Soledad. Well, it is decision day in the Records webcam spying case. Darwin Ravi could get 10 years in prison for hate crimes against Tyler Clementi. A jury convicted him of spying on and intimidating his gay roommate. Clementi jumped off New York's George Washington Bridge, killing himself after Ravi used a webcam to spy on him with another man. Again, he'll be sentenced today. Aftershocks rattling northern Italy, thousands of victims waking up in cars, tents, and schools after one of the worst quakes to hit northeast Italy in centuries. The 6.0 magnitude quake killed 7 and injured at least 50 people yesterday. The quake knocked down a clock tower, reduced buildings that have stood for hundreds of years to rubble. It also destroyed $65 million worth of cheese in a region known for its Parmesan production. Dominique Strauss-Kahn could soon face charges in the alleged gang rape of a Belgian prostitute during a party at her hotel in Washington, D.C. almost 2 years ago. French prosecutors are launching an investigation. A French newspaper says the allegations came from statements 2 escorts made to Belgian police. You may remember he was also arrested after a New York hotel maid accused him of sexual assault last year. He was cleared on that charge after her story fell apart. He's not on the Republican ticket, not yet at least, but Florida Senator Marco Rubio sounded very vice presidential this weekend, going after President Obama, attack dog style.
The man who today occupies the White House and is running for president is a very different person. We have not seen such a divisive figure in modern American history as we have over the last 3.5 years.
A DNC spokesman fired back, saying Republicans attacking the president for being divisive is the ultimate case of the pot calling the kettle black. Now let's check in on the markets. U.S. stock futures poised for a rebound after closing lower on Friday. You know, stocks had their worst week of the year last week, mostly because of concerns about Greece and its future. Commodities are cooling, by the way. Oil prices are down to about $91 a barrel right now. Bee Gees singer Robin Gibb is being remembered by his peers as a musical icon with an unmistakable voice. Gibb died Sunday after a long battle with cancer. Along with brothers Barry and Maurice, the Bee Gees helped define the disco era, in large part due to songs from Saturday Night Fever. Robin Gibb's death comes just days after the passing of another 70s legend, Donna Summer. Really a soundtrack for a certain generation's life.
Yeah, the disco era taking a big giant hit. God, Donna Summer too, right? I was on vacation when that happened. That's so sad. I missed her too. All right, Christine, thank you. Still ahead this morning on Starting Point. He was arrested dozens of times and beaten into a daze while trying to end segregation in the South. This morning, civil rights hero, the congressman from Georgia, John Lewis, is telling his story in a new book. It's all congresspeople all morning here on Starting Point. We have Congresswoman Bono Mack with us this morning, and John Lewis will join us as well in just a moment. And then a school shutting off its vending machines after getting a big, giant junk food fine. We'll tell you what they have to pay. You're watching Starting Point. We're back in a moment.
America's Choice 2012 is brought to you by Cadillac, the new standard of the world. Go to CNN.com/election for trending political stories and the latest news on the campaigns.
When it comes to sports sedans, the Audi A6 is faster at depreciating. The 270 horsepower 2012 Cadillac CTS, the winner of an Edmunds.com Best Retained Value Award. Take advantage of this exceptional offer on the exhilarating CTS sports sedan today.
You didn't choose to travel like this, but you can choose to travel like this and enjoy more of this and this. It's a new stay. This is Courtyard.
Can't fly to Paris for the French Open? No problem. DirecTV gives you 6 dedicated channels so you can watch every match of the tournament. All of Roland Garros is yours when you have DirecTV.
We had never used a contractor before and didn't know where to start.
At Angie's List, you'll find reviews on everything from home repair to healthcare, written by people just like you.
No company can pay to be on Angie's List, so you can trust what you're reading.
Angie's List is like having thousands of close neighbors where I can go ask for personal recommendations.
That's the idea. Before you have any work done, check Angie's List.
From roofers to plumbers to dentists and more, Angie's List. Reviews you can trust.
I love you, Angie. Sorry, honey.
A route map shows you where we go, but not how we get there. Because in this business, there are no straight lines, only the twists and turns of an unpredictable industry. So the 80,000 employees at Delta must anticipate the unexpected and never let the rules overrule common sense. This is how we tame the unwieldiness of air travel, until it's not just lines you see, it's the world.
Surf's up, everybody get your boards and your wetsuits. FreeCreditScore.com's gonna direct you to check your credit score before it gets too late, and you end up strapped for cash patching your board with duct tape. So hit FreeCreditScore.com, find out what credit's about, or else you could be headed for a credit wipeout. A credit wipeout. A credit wipeout. A credit wipeout. You could be headed for a wipeout.
Offer applies with enrollment at FreeCreditScore.com.
Little light of mine. I'm gonna let this might be the first time we've had Mavis Staples on Starting Point, I believe. That's This Little Light of Mine. That's from Congressman John Lewis's playlist. I have to make a correction. I said Mick Jagger was 64. He's 68. You were right, Congresswoman. I flipped the ages.
I still thought he was over the 70s, so.
Right.
You're in better place with him right now than I am.
Yeah, I'm closer by an inch. Congressman John Lewis endured attacks from angry mobs, bloody beatings by police, and more than 40 arrests. It was all in the name of civil rights. He was 25 years old when he led the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a nonviolent act which ended in violence on the part of authorities against Lewis and his fellow marchers. He shares the lessons that were learned from that era and the ways to apply them today in a new book which is called Across That Bridge, Life Lessons and a Vision for Change. It's so nice to have you. Thanks for talking with us this morning.
Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted and very pleased to be here and to see my colleague. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see you, too.
We're so glad Starting Point could bring everybody together here this morning. Absolutely.
Well, you need to know, this is this man all the time. On the floor of the United States House of Representatives, he is always a gentleman and really epitomizes what is right about the Congress. So it's an honor to be here with him today.
Well, it's good to be with you. You know, I believe deeply in the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. And I truly believe that we must respect the dignity and the worth of every human being.
Is it getting harder to pitch that message? We were talking earlier about sort of the angry messages, whether it's through sometimes social media, which can be so inherently hostile. We've been watching pictures all morning of the protest in Chicago. It's about 150 protesters in that black bloc group. So, you know, small number compared to the bigger number of the protesters, but very violent protesters. Is it hard to get the message of nonviolence out today?
I still think we have an obligation, really a mission, to teach people the way of peace, the way of love, the way of nonviolence. You may disagree with someone, but respect that person. And my book is all about moving away from violence and conflict and living a life of peace and create a community at peace with itself.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Congressman, 42 years ago, you did exactly that, right? You put a protest, a march together that was specifically about, or had an integral part of its message, nonviolence. As you see what's going on in the Occupy Chicago NATO movement, what did you do to keep those who would co-opt your movement or introduce violence into your movement out? Was it simply the message that kept them out, or did you have to do something proactive?
Well, before anyone could participate in a march, or sit in, or go on a freedom ride, or stand in at a theater, you have to attend a nonviolent workshop. You have to study, prepare yourself. Study what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa. Study what he accomplished in India. Study what Martin Luther King Jr. was all about. Study Thoreau and civil disobedience. And it would just didn't happen one day or one night over a period of time.
You grew up in poverty, no running water in your home. You had 3 people you knew who were assassinated as you went through your life's work. You were nearly killed in various marches and arrests that you were subjected to. You rose out of all of that to become a congressperson. Your book is very optimistic. Do you feel optimistically about the state of the nation today?
One must be optimistic. One must be hopeful. If you get lost in a sea of despair, you will give up. The book is about never, ever giving up or giving in or giving out. That you have to keep the faith. And you have to take the long, hard look that the struggle is not a struggle that lasts for one day or 1 week or 1 congressional term or 1 semester. It is a struggle of a lifetime, of many lifetimes. But we all must play a role and do our part.
What's been the best moment of your life? If you had to pick one moment looking back, what's been the best?
Meeting Martin Luther King Jr. when I was only 18 years old changed my life forever, set me on a different path, made me a better human being. And from that point on, I committed my life to a way of peace, the way of love, a way of just finding a way to get in the way. Because my parents had told me, my grandparents and great-grandparents, don't get in trouble, don't get in the way. But I was inspired to get in the way, to get in trouble. It was good trouble, necessary trouble.
You wanted to jump in here?
Yes, I wanted to ask you about a civil rights cause of our time, specifically marriage equality, which I know you've come out in support of, and the president, and just recently the NAACP. I'm wondering if you think that, people constantly say, oh, the African-American community, the religious community within the African-American community is opposed to gay marriage. I'm wondering if you think that the NAACP, your support, the president's support, is that going to move the needle in terms of support in that community?
And is it true? I mean, is that even true? I'm curious about that.
Should we be debunking that?
Well, I don't think the great majority of African-American, whether they be religious leaders or political leaders, are opposed to marriage equality. I think that is something that is very much misleading. Many of us take a simple lesson from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King used to say over and over again, when people ask about interracial marriage, he would say racists don't fall in love and get married. Individuals fall in love and get married. So if 2 men or 2 women want to fall in love and get married, it's their business. It's not the business of the federal government or the state government. You cannot have equality for one group of people and not for another group. You cannot build a wall.
And I know one of the things you were fighting about in the civil rights movement were voting rights, and there's been a lot of concern about states passing laws that many worry will restrict voting rights. What can we do about that? What's happening on that front?
Well, I happen to believe that there is a systematic, deliberate effort to take us back to another period, making harder and more difficult for young people, for seniors, for the disabled community, for minorities to participate in the democratic process.
The book is called Across That Bridge, Life Lessons and a Vision for Change. It's so nice to have you, sir. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Always good to see you.
Thank you so much. We've got to take a short break. We're back in just a moment. I'm going to tell you about a junk food fine. Did it go too far? A big chunk of change that now high school's looking at ways to pay it. We're going to tell you about that straight ahead on Starting Point. We're back in just a moment.